I'm going to turn my camera on for a minute.
Oh, we're a little early too. Fun.
Yeah. Am I all robot-y and blurry?
You're not moving at all.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I can hear her, but it's just a frozen blocky image.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, there we go.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Lives of the Saints, episode 11. And of course, I have my camera off. It's that time of the day again, Jeremy.
Yeah, that's what happens. It's a shifting window though, so hopefully we in maybe a couple more weeks it won't be an issue. The sun will start going down soon enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeremy's got a couple of he's got two saints. Or no, you were going to just do the one, right?
I think I'll just do the one. Yeah.
I really enjoyed that read, by the way.
Oh, good. Yeah, I love the story of St. Paul the Simple. His pure devotion to being obedient is pretty remarkable and is a good example for me. I need to practice that more. So
yeah,
big thing.
Yeah, he has well, we'll hear about it. We'll have
I'll show the story in a minute. We should give a few minutes for people to get here.
Yeah,
anything big and cool happen this week for you?
Anything big? No, nothing.
Okay.
No, you know what? The temperatures just dropped. We had our first frost, which is actually really late. We usually have our first frost at the beginning of September, but we didn't have it till the other night. But it's also been blowing and raining and cold. And I thought we might actually get a little bit of snow one night, but it didn't happen, thank goodness. You know, you can smell it in the air.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I could smell it, and I'm like, no, not yet.
Wow. So, well, we get our first frost in November, which is kind of sad for the apples. I prefer apples after a freeze. Yeah, they're much tastier. But here, our frost is just too late, so we don't really get to. We can't wait that long. They all fall off the tree if you try to wait.
Yeah, I actually just. So we planted 2 apple trees, one last year and one the year before. And so they're just actually getting situated.
Nice.
One of them is a grafted tree, so it's got 4 different apples on it.
Oh, nice.
And but then I heard today in the live stream from Joseph that that's a big no-no for Jews. They can't have those trees.
Oh.
Interestingly, they can't do hybridization. There's a lot of laws against hybridizing.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. Thankfully, we're not under those dietary restrictions anymore.
Yeah.
We just have the no blood, right?
Yeah, and the other tree that I bought last year is just a straight up one selection of apples.
Oh, gotcha.
But the apples were really tiny. And there weren't very many because we had like a ton of rain in the spring and it was cold. And yeah. So, that's a good point, William. No human organ transplants.
Well, I wouldn't eat any human organs, that's for sure. If that's
what no, but I'm wondering if Joseph needed a kidney, like then what?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a good point.
I have to ask him.
I don't know I know Orthodox don't do organ, or we're generally counseled not to be an organ donor, but I don't know about receiving them. I haven't really asked about that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I know we're encouraged not to be an organ donor.
Okay. So, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I don't know all of the theological details. I just know that it's not recommended. The other thing is, though, I don't want to put my family through that, because when my father passed, we weren't really sure. I mean, I knew he wouldn't be able to be a donor because his body, he was not in good shape health-wise at all. But the pressure they put on us and the guilt trip that they put on us was really burdensome. And finally, it was just like, okay, fine, take what you can. And, they immediately called us within like 3 hours and were like, yeah, we can't take anything. Thank you. Like, I tried to tell you that, but they won't listen. Like, it's just it really is a high pressure kind of sales situation. I don't like it at
That's
all.
terrible,
Yeah.
and I
I
mean,
mean, I can't speak for how it
don't
is
these
in
people
Canada,
have
but
to be, like they can't be dead, they have to be alive for that, no?
well, my dad no, that my they took my dad off of life support and he passed shortly thereafter, so they could have it was like there was a window where they could
Okay,
have if they could have used something, they could have, but he
they
was in
didn't.
terrible shape. Yeah. No.
Jeremy, I'm gonna are you gonna be freaked out if I leave you here for a minute? Because I am gonna reset my router and see if I can't get this thing happening.
Okay. Oh, that's
It'll
fine.
take just a couple minutes,
Okay.
but I will be gone, so I will come back.
Okay, I'm going to
And
think of
well,
something
if
to
you
talk
want
about. Give
to
me a topic to talk about. I don't know what to talk
well,
about.
you know what? Why don't you read the story while I'm gone?
Okay, I can do
I
that.
I read that, so if you wanna get your screen
Okay.
ready and
Sure.
I
Yeah,
can
all
put
right.
that in
Hold
for
on.
you.
I will pull it up. Present. Share screen. And I want window. This one. Share. Okay. How does it look on the
Alright.
screen? Oh, yeah, that looks fine. Okay.
Okay, I read through this, so, I'm aware of the story,
Okay, great.
and I'll be back.
Okay, sounds good. There's actually 2 different versions of the story in this, and I'm gonna share both of them because there's
Yeah,
some details in the separate accounts. So there is a
yeah,
little overlap, but I think it's worthwhile if you can if the audience, can be patient. And
yeah.
generally, they're pretty patient, so I think it'll be fine.
Oh, yeah, that'll be good.
Alright,
Okay,
Saint
see you in a
Paul the Simple. Okay, see you in a minute. Um, the servant of Christ, Hyrax, as well as Cronius and several other brothers, told me the story I am going to tell you about Paul the Simple. He was a peasant farmer of transparently innocent and simple life, and he had taken a most beautiful woman for a wife who nevertheless was of very lax morals. Led by Providence to an outcome which he was in fact half hoping for, he came back from the fields unexpectedly one day, went inside, and found her and a man together. When he saw her and the man she was having sex with, he gave a forthright and heartfelt laugh. Fine, fine, he said. This means that she is no longer any responsibility of mine. In Jesus' name, I acknowledge her no longer. Go, take her with you and her children, for I am leaving to become a monk. Without saying anything to anybody else, he took an 8-day journey to Holy Anthony and knocked on his door. This is St. Anthony the Great. So Paul the Simple went to St. Anthony the Great, who was in the desert. What do you want? Asked Anthony when he came to the door. To become a monk, replied Paul. You must be at least 60. You can't become a monk, said Anthony. Live in the town, work for your living, trusting in the grace of God. You would not be able to cope with all the trials of solitude. Whatever you told me to do, I would do it, the old man replied. I have told you, said Anthony. You are old. You can't be a monk. Go away. Or if you do really want to be a monk, go to a cenobium where there are many brothers to support you in your frailty. I am here all by myself, fasting for 5 days before eating. And with these words, he tried to drive Paul away. Refusing to admit him, Anthony shut the door and for 3 days did not go outside, not even to answer the call of nature. But the old man stayed where he was. On the 4th day, he really had to go outside, but when he opened the door and went out, he saw Paul still there and said, Go away, old man. Why do you keep on bothering me? You can't stay here. I don't intend to stay anywhere else except here, said Paul. Anthony looked at him and saw that he had nothing with him to sustain life, no bread, no water, or anything else, and he had now been fasting for 4 days. He is so unused to fasting he might die, thought Anthony, and I will be to blame. And so he took him in. If you can be obedient and do what I tell you, said Anthony, you'll be all right. I will do whatever you say, Paul replied. Anthony in those days followed just as rigorous a way of life as he did when he was young. In order to test Paul's mettle, he said to him, Stay here and pray while I go in and fetch something for you to work with. He then went into his inner room and watched Paul through the window. For the rest of the week, he stayed there without moving, even though scorched by the heat. At the end of the week, he brought some palm leaves, which he had soaked in water. Take these and weave a rope as you see me doing, he said. The old man wove until the 9th hour, which was 3 p.m., completing 15 arm lengths with great difficulty. Anthony inspected what he had done and was not satisfied with it. You've done that very badly, he said. Undo it and do it again. It was now the 7th day that this elderly man had been fasting, but Anthony was treating him severely like this to see whether he would give up and abandon the life of a monk. But he just took the branches and rewove them, and with great labor put right the unevenness with which he had done them at first. Anthony saw that he had neither grumbled, nor been downcast, nor turned aside, nor become resentful to the slightest degree. And he began to feel sorry for him. And as the sun set, he said, "Well, little father, shall we break some bread together?" "If you think that's what's right, Abba," replied Paul, thus leaving the decision to Anthony, without jumping up eagerly at the mention of food. Anthony began to change his mind. "Get the table ready then," he said, and he did so. Anthony put the bread on the table, 4 6-ounce rolls. He put 1 to soak for himself, for they were dry, and 3 for Paul. Anthony sang a psalm which he knew, and when he had repeated it 12 times, he also said a prayer 12 times. This he did in order to test Paul further. But the old man prayed too, as promptly and as eagerly as the great Anthony himself. I really think that he would rather feed on scorpions than live falsely. "Sit down," the great Anthony said to Paul after the 12 prayers, "but we won't eat until vespers. Wait till the bread is edible." The time for vespers came, and Paul still had not eaten, when Anthony said, "Get up, we'll pray and then sleep." They left the table and did so. Halfway through the night, Anthony woke Paul for prayers and went on with them right through to the 9th hour, which is again 3 p.m. But at last, when vespers came and the table had been prepared and they had sung and prayed, they sat down to eat. Anthony ate 1 roll and did not pick up another one. The old man was eating more slowly and still had the roll which he had started. Anthony waited till he had finished and said, "Come, little father, eat another roll." "If you have another one, I will," said Paul, "but not if you won't." "I've had quite sufficient for one who is a monk," said Anthony. "Since I want to be a monk," said Paul, "that's enough for me too, then." And he got up and said 12 prayers and sang 12 psalms. After the prayers, they slept a little for the first part of the night, then rose and sang psalms again till dawn. He then sent him out to wander in the desert. "Come back after 3 days," he said. This he did. When some brothers came on a visit, he paid close attention to Anthony and did whatever Anthony wanted. "See to the visitors' needs and keep silence," he said, "and don't eat anything till they have started on their journey back." At the end of the 3rd week, in which Paul had not eaten anything, the brothers asked him why he kept silent, to which he replied nothing at all. "Why keep silent?" said Anthony. "Speak to the brothers." So he spoke. Once when Anthony was given a jar of honey, he told Paul to break the jar. He did so, and the honey spilled. "Now scrape up the honey with this shell," he ordered, "but don't get any dirt mixed up in it." Once he ordered him to draw water all day. When his garment got a bit tattered, he told him to just get used to it. In the end, this man had grasped such firm hold on obedience by the divine grace given him that he was able to command the demons. When the great Anthony saw that this man had promptly carried out everything he had asked him to do in the way he ordered his life, he said, "See if you can keep on doing this day by day, brother, and stay with me." "I don't know what else you can show me," said Paul. "I do whatever I see you doing, quite easily and without any strain, the Lord being my helper." On another day, Anthony admitted, in the name of Jesus, that he had indeed become a monk. The great and blessed Anthony had become convinced that the soul of this servant of Christ had become almost perfected in all things, even though he was somewhat simple. After a few months, Anthony was moved by the grace of God to build a cell for him 3 or 4 miles away from his own cell, and said to him, "See now, by the help of the grace of Christ, you have become a monk. Now live by yourself and even take on the demons." So a year after Paul the most simple came to live with him, he was highly experienced in a disciplined way of life and was found worthy to battle against the demons and against all kinds of diseases. One day, there was brought to Antony a young man vexed beyond measure by one of the most powerful and savage demons who railed against heaven itself with curses and blasphemies. Antony had a look at the young man and said to those who had brought him, "This is not a task for me. I have not yet been given the grace to deal with this very powerful type of demon. Paul the simple has the gift of dealing with this one." The great Antony went to Paul, that most excellent man, taking them all with him. "Abba Paul," he said, "cast out this demon from this person, so that he may return home cured and glorify God." "Why not you?" asked Paul. "It is not for me," said Antony. "I have other concerns." And the great Antony left the boy there and returned to his cell. The unassuming old man stood up and poured out a strong prayer to challenge the demon and said, "Abba Antony says, 'Depart from this man.'" "I will not, you disgusting, pompous old man," said the demon, with many curses and blasphemies. Paul put on his sheepskin and belabored him in the back, crying, "Go out, Abba Antony says." The demon abused both Paul and Antony with curses, saying, "You are disgusting old men, lazy and greedy, never content to mind your own business. What have you got in common with us? Why are you browbeating us?" "Either go now," said Paul, "or I will call upon the power of Christ to bring destruction upon you." But this unclean demon railed against Jesus also with curses and blasphemies. "I am not going," he shouted. This made Paul get angry with the demon. He went outside. It was midday, when the Egyptian heat bears comparison with the furnace of Babylon. The holy man stood up straight like a statue on top of a rock and prayed, "O Jesus Christ, you were crucified under Pontius Pilate. Take note that I will not come down from this rock, nor will I eat or drink even if I die, until you hear me and cast out this demon from this man and liberate him from the unclean spirit." And even as the simple and humble Paul was praying, before he had even finished, the demon cried out, "I'm going! I'm going! Driven out by force, overcome by tyranny. I'm getting out of this man and I won't come back anymore. It is the simplicity and humility of Paul which has driven me out, and I don't know where to go." The moment he went, he changed into an enormous dragon about 70 cubits long, which crept off toward the Red Sea. Thus were fulfilled the words of Holy Scripture, "The righteous man shows his faith by what he does." Proverbs 12:17. And, "On whom shall I look, says the Lord, if not on him who is gentle and humble and trembles at my words?" Isaiah 66:2. Although lesser demons can be cast out by the faith of men in authority, it takes humble men to be able to put to flight the demons of greatest power. Such were the miracles of the humble Paul the simple, and there were many others he did, even greater than these. He was known as simple by all the brothers. Here's another version of his life. We must relate, in chronological order, the history of the most celebrated disciples of Antony, and particularly that of Paul, surnamed the Simple. It is said that he dwelt in the country and was married to a beautiful woman, and that having surprised her in the act of adultery, he laughed placidly and affirmed with an oath that he would live with her no longer, that he left her with the adulterer and went immediately to join Antony in the desert. This is St. Anthony. It is further related that he was exceedingly meek and patient, and that, being aged and unaccustomed to monastic severity, Antony put his strength to the proof by various trials, for he was newly come and detected nothing ignoble, and that, having given evidence of perfect philosophy, he was sent to live alone, as no longer requiring a teacher. And God himself confirmed the testimony of Antony and demonstrated the man to be most illustrious through his deeds, and as greater than even his teacher in vexing and expelling demons. And this is a third account. I didn't realize there were three.
Mhm.
Among the disciples of the Blessed Anthony was one Paul, nicknamed the Simple. His first conversion happened like this. With his own eyes, he saw his wife committing adultery one day. So without saying anything to anyone, he left home, overwhelmed with sadness in his heart, and fled to the desert. After wandering about there in distress, he came at last to Anthony's monastery. He took comfort from this fortunate chance because of what he had heard about the place. He met Anthony and asked him how he could find a path to salvation. Anthony sensed that he was a simple sort of man and told him that if he would abide by the instructions that he would give him, he would be saved. He replied that he would do whatever he was asked. To test this promise, Anthony said to him as soon as he stood outside the door of his cell, "Wait here and pray until I come back again." He then went inside and stayed there for a day and a night, from time to time watching Paul secretly through the window. He saw that Paul prayed without ceasing, never moving at all, just standing there in the heat of the day and the dew of the night, so intent on what he had been told that he did not move from the spot in the slightest degree. When Anthony came out the next day, he took him in and began to teach him about each sort of manual work customary in solitude. Work with the hands took care of the needs of the body, while the thoughts of the heart and the intention of the mind made room for what came from God. He told him to take food in the evening, but warned him never to satisfy his hunger completely, and to be particularly sparing in what he drank, for mental fantasies were encouraged just by too much water, as bodily heat by too much wine. And when he had fully instructed him on how to conduct himself properly in all things, he built a cell for him not far away, that is, at a distance of 3 miles, where he ordered him to carry on doing what he learned. He visited him from time to time and was delighted to see he was keeping a firm grasp on what he had been taught, persevering wholeheartedly in his solitude. One day, some senior brothers came to visit the Holy Anthony, men very advanced in spirituality, and Paul happened to be visiting at the same time. There was a long conversation on deep and mystical subjects and much discussion about the prophets and the Savior. "Did Christ come before the prophets?" asked Paul out of the simplicity of his heart. Anthony was rather embarrassed for him for asking such a stupid question. "Get away with you, say no more," he said, in the indulgent sort of tone of voice reserved for idiots. But Paul believed that everything Anthony told him to do was as it were a command from God, and obeyed immediately. He went back to his cell and accepted this command and began to keep absolute silence, allowing not a word to pass his lips. When Anthony realized this, he wondered why he was behaving like this, for he was quite unaware that he had given Paul any command. He ordered him to speak and to tell him why he was keeping silent. "You, Father," said Paul, "told me to get away and say no more." Anthony was amazed that Paul was taking literally the words which he had quite carelessly said. "This man puts us all to shame," he said, "for we fail to hear what is spoken to us from heaven, whereas he observes whatever comes out of our mouth." Anthony was determined to teach him a great deal about obedience, and was accustomed to give orders which seemed quite unreasonable and purposeless, in order to train his mind in the habit of obedience. He told him once to draw water from the well and to pour it out on the ground. He told him to unravel baskets and then weave them together again, to tear his garment apart, then sew it up again, then take it apart again. In all such practices, Anthony bears witness that he remained totally receptive. He learned not to contradict any of those unreasonable things which he was commanded to do, and so he was brought on by all these things and soon arrived at a state of perfection. Anthony used him as an example. If anyone wishes to come quickly to perfection, he taught, he should not be his own master, nor obey his own will, even if he thought he was in the right. According to the command of the Savior, he should take note that above all else he should deny himself and renounce his own will. For the Savior himself said, "I came not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me." The will of Christ, of course, could not be in any way different from the will of the Father, for he who came to teach obedience would not have been obedient himself if he had merely been doing his own will. How much more, then, will we be judged disobedient if we do our own will? Therefore, this Paul is an example for us, For by the merits of his simplicity and obedience, he has attained to such a height of spiritual grace that the Lord has shown forth a great number of much more powerful virtues in him than in Anthony. Because of the abundance of his gifts, many people came from all parts to be cured by him. Anthony feared that the attention of such a large crowd would overwhelm him, so he sent him deeper into the desert, where it was not so easy for anyone to get to him. And Anthony would thus be more able to deal with visitors. But if Anthony himself could not cure anyone, he would then send them to Paul, as being more abundantly supplied with healing gifts, and Paul cured them. The simplicity of his faithfulness was great in the eyes of the Lord. They say that once someone suffering from rabies was biting like a dog everyone who was trying to come and see Paul. He was brought to Paul, who persisted in prayer that the demon troubling him should be put to flight. And after a while, when there did not seem to be anything happening, he is said to have cried out indignantly like a small child to the Lord, "If you don't cure him, I am not going to get anything to eat today." And immediately God granted him his request as if he were a favorite child. The rabies was instantly cured.
Well, this is actually one of my favorites so far, I have to say, Jeremy, because
you're a little robot-y. You might have to go.
Oh, I have to go. Oh.
No camera again. I'm sorry.
Okay, fine. You hear me okay?
Yep.
I said,
now you sound okay.
Yeah, this is so far a favorite for me. And it's because St. Paul is so childlike.
Yes.
And I had to pull out my copy of George MacDonald's Child in the Mist, actually, is what it's titled, sermon. And he quotes from, and I think it's worth tagging onto the end of that story.
Great.
He quotes scripture, Mark 9:33 and 37, and it reads that as follows. And he came to Capernaum, and being in the house, he asked them, "What was it that you disputed among yourselves by the way?" But they held their peace, for by the way they had disputed among themselves who should be the greatest. And he sat down and called the 12, and said to them, "If any man desire to be first, the same shall be last of all and servant of all." And he took a child and set him in the midst of them. And when he had taken him in his arms, he said unto them, "Whosoever shall receive one of such children in my name receives me, and whosoever shall receive me receiveth not me, but him that sent me." And then George MacDonald, I'm just going to read a couple quotes from the sermon. He says, "Verily I say unto you, except ye be converted and become as little children, you shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Whosoever shall humble himself as this little child, the same is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoso shall receive one such little child in my name receives me. But whoso shall offend one of these little ones that believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and that he were drowned in the depths of the sea." And then he goes on to talk about the child that Jesus actually picked up, that it was possibly a child of Peter, because St. Mark says that the incident fell at Capernaum and, quote, "in the house. A child, therefore, with some of the characteristics of Peter."
It was St. Irenaeus, I believe.
Irenaeus?
Yeah, it was St. Irenaeus.
Was he alive at the time of Christ?
Yeah, he was a child.
Oh, okay. And then he goes on to talk about the difference between childhood and childlikeness. And he says that the childlike is the divine.
St. Ignatius, I'm sorry, not St. Irenaeus. Saint
Oh, okay,
Ignatius of
that makes
Antioch.
more sense. Yeah.
Yeah, Saint Ignatius of Antioch sat was the child who Christ put on his lap.
Right. I've heard that too.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
And then he says, then to receive a child in the name of Jesus is to receive Jesus. To
Mm.
receive Jesus is to receive God. Therefore, to receive the child is to receive God himself. That such is the feeling of the words, and that such was the feeling in the heart of our Lord when he spoke them. I may show from another golden thread that may be traced through the shining web of his golden words. What is the kingdom of Christ? A rule of love, of truth, a rule of service. The king is the chief servant in it. The kings of the earth have dominion. It shall not be so among you. The Son of Man came to minister. My Father worketh hitherto, and I work. The great workman is the great king, laboring for his own. So he that would be greatest among them, and come nearest to the king himself, must be the servant of all. It is like king, like subject in the kingdom of heaven. No rule of force, as of one kind over another kind. It is the rule of kind, of nature, of deepest nature, of God. If then to enter into this kingdom we must become children, the spirit of children must be its pervading spirit throughout. From lowly subject to lowliest king. The lesson added by St. Luke to the presentation of the child is, quote, for he that is least among you all, the same shall be great. And St. Matthew says, quote, whosoever shall humble himself as this little child, the same is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Close
The oh, go ahead.
Um, and then I'm just I could read the whole thing, but I won't.
Sure.
So you just go ahead with your thought, and I'll just find one other thing that I wanted to read out of here.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say the if you look in like when you're reading fairy tales, they refer that like you frequently run across the character as like the town idiot or
Yeah,
the town simpleton. And I think that was the fairy tale way or the folktale way of saying like the autistic kid. Because it's always a kid who takes things literally and does not understand social context. And
yeah,
and then you try to instruct him and he takes whatever you tell him to do and he applies it to the next time that something happens, but the context is all wrong. And so then he looks crazy again. And and um and I think that's what's going on with Paul as well. Paul the simple is like he just whatever you tell him, he just believes you and he
right,
just takes it straightforwardly and he doesn't understand figures of speech or situational context. It's like, go out of here and don't talk anymore. Like he's just and so he does. He just and I think it's very easy to think we need to be all complex and understand everything and agree with everything and consent and does this align with my whatever. And Paul the simple is showing us that there's a great grace that can come with being just purely obedient and not trying to think for it yourself and crucifying your own intellect essentially is what we're called to do,
right.
and, which is not easy for me.
Yeah, and I mean the thing that stood out to me was, he looked at Saint Anthony as father, right?
Yeah.
He called him Abba,
Yeah.
and he was treated as a child, um, and tested as we do with our children because we want to see, we want to give them a sense of um, what they're capable of, right?
Yeah.
And so his simplicity was, to me, it was a childlike simplicity.
Yes.
And so I'll just read this last little bit from George MacDonald.
Sure.
For when is the child the ideal child in our eyes and to our hearts? Is it not when with gentle hand he takes his father by the beard and turns that father's face up to his brothers and sisters to kiss, when even the lovely selfishness of love-seeking has vanished, and the heart is absorbed in loving? In this, then, is God like the child, that he is simply and altogether our friend, our Father, our more than friend, Father and Mother, our infinite love-perfect God, grand and strong beyond all that human imagination can conceive of, poet thinking and kingly action. He is delicate beyond all that human tenderness can conceive of husband or wife, homely beyond all that human heart can conceive of father or mother. He has not two thoughts about us. With him, all is simplicity of purpose and meaning and effort and end, namely, that we should be as he is, think the same thoughts, mean the same things, possess the same blessedness. It is so plain that anyone may see it. Everyone ought to see it. Everyone shall see it. It must be so. He is utterly true and good to us, nor shall anything withstand his will. So, yeah, I just wanted to share some of those thoughts from him because that's what gave St. Paul the power to cast out demons. Because he was like George MacDonald, when he's talking about the simplicity of God, he's talking about the fact that God is just always straight. He's not simple. And neither was Paul, actually.
Right.
He's not stupid,
No.
right? He was simple in the sense that he was single-minded, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And fully surrendered.
Yeah.
Right.
So
He
is
just
God.
fully surrendered his will. Whatever you say, Dad. That's what I'll
And
do.
and so is God.
Yeah.
That always struck me with George MacDonald when he said, that the reason that Jesus says that if you received one of these, you received me, and if you received me, you've received the Father, because that is actually what God is like.
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the few places where Christ describes himself, he says, I'm humble and gentle of heart.
Yeah. I think I thought that was quoted
I
Isaiah
think you're right.
66 too, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to drop a link in here. So if anybody wants to join us, they can. Almost forgot. I got so excited about that.
No, it's a beautiful tie-in. I heard the analogy, and I think it's really appropriate, about like when you're young and your parents tell you, "Hey, we're going on vacation. We're going to Yellowstone." You know, you you just go, "Yay!" You don't go like, you don't like start thinking about, okay, did you get us a hotel?
No,
Is it one we
no.
can afford? Are the beds going to be comfortable? Can you afford to feed us? Can we eat at a restaurant? Should we go to the grocery store and get some food for the cooler or for the trip? But like when you're a kid, you're not thinking about any of that. You're just like, great. And even though you go there and you might be hot and you might be uncomfortable and you might be sweaty sometimes and you might be tired and frustrated, you're still not like second guessing your parents. Like, why did you bring me here? What are we doing? This is not going well. I don't feel good. I am hot.
Right.
Please take me home. It's just like, your parents are adapting as you go
Unless
along
you
the
were
way.
unless you were my son when he was a kid.
No,
That's kind of what he sounded like. Oh
yeah.
god. He
But it's
was
just,
really not very social.
yeah. Well, and it probably depends on the age as
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
right?
I'm
But
just joshing you.
yeah, but it's just uh the illustration is just, that idea of like not trying to figure everything out and second guess everything and deliberate over everything. It's like sometimes just trying to, like, it's almost like trying to have too much agency. And I know this is going to make Grizz uncomfortable, but it's like the idea of like, if you're trying to choose too many things all the time, I think you get overwhelmed and you just you fail. It's like taking on too much, and I think that's another lesson that we can get from the monastics, and especially from St. Paul the Simple, where it's like, don't try to figure everything out. Don't try to decide everything
Yeah.
and optimize everything.
Well,
It's like,
I thought it was really, I could just imagine him, and he's like, "Okay, good. I'm rid of her. Now I can do what I really wanna do, and I'm off to the desert," right? And he gets to St. Anthony, and St. Anthony's like, "No, you're too old, go home." And he just plunks himself down there and waits.
yeah. Well, that reminded me of Fight Club.
And here but I just wanna make this point,
Oh, yeah.
that's the only thing he didn't do that St. Anthony asked him to do.
Oh, that's a good point. He
Yes,
didn't leave. That's a
he
good
did
point.
not, and
'Cause
that's
he's
what
like,
makes him
I didn't have
single-minded.
anywhere else to go. Yeah, yeah, you're right. He didn't have
Mhm.
anywhere else to go. That's true.
He's just
That's
like,
a really good
"No."
point.
And he said to him, "Well, you could go to the monastery or you're gonna live with the brothers or" He's like,
Yeah.
Nope,
Nope.
this is what I'm doing, and I'm staying here."
Yeah. Until I die. Yeah.
And apparently he lived, like, another 40 years or something. He lived old.
Yeah, yeah, he did. He lived a long time.
Yeah.
It's a good point. None of these accounts shared that, but yes, you're right. He did live a long
I
time.
watched a Sunday school cartoon video of him
Oh,
for children. Yeah. 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 I just thought, "Oh, I like this guy."
yeah, it's refreshing to see his surrender and his but also the grace that he received as a result. It was like God was right there,
Mhm.
the whole time. It's like he was like, this isn't hard. I just watch whatever you do is what I do. It's easy.
Yeah, and I don't know, somehow I can relate to that. I mean, I'm not that single-minded all the time, but at the same time, it's like I have been in situations where I've had to do things that I didn't wanna do, and I could either gripe and complain, or I could just do them and keep my mouth shut
Mhm.
and say things like, "This is unto my salvation."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I
You know?
sometimes say, Lord, please see my small, stupid sacrifice. Please notice. Which is
I do
vainglory, right? But I think
I
that's
do
the
say
only
that.
place you can ask for, like, Lord, please notice this, right? Like, I
Yeah,
don't want anyone else to notice, but please notice. Please see my efforts as a sacrifice, as feeble as it is.
yeah. Yeah.
Nobody wants to join. Nobody wants to talk to us. You're too intimidating,
Nobody
Carrie.
wants to talk to us. What? I'm the
Uh,
least intimidating person ever.
yeah. Well, you're as tough as woodpecker lips. Not everyone knows how to handle that.
We had a woodpecker once fly into the window and broke its beak. It was just
Oh,
lucky. Oh, Matthew's driving home. Okay, when you get
oh,
home, Matthew, I hope you don't have far to go. Okay, cool. 15. Um, and anybody else, please jump in. I know
yeah.
that Cassandra won't. I know that William won't, and I know that who else is in here?
Joy is in here.
Joy's in here. She might. That's it. Yon God. Yon God. He's probably gone. He hasn't said much since.
Oh, did he come in? I didn't see him. I didn't see him
He's
in.
at the top, at the very
Oh,
top.
okay.
His,
Oh,
comment.
yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe he went to go listen to the. It sounded like there was a.
Oh, there he is. There you
Sounded
are.
like
We
there was a
found
battle.
you.
Oh,
Sleepy time.
nice. Okay.
Yeah. Alrighty then. Well, you got a little bedtime story.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. Hi. Oh,
Hello.
Brandy.
Hello. Oh, we have more people. This is nice.
Hi, Brandy. Nice to have you. Yeah, this woodpecker that was long time ago when we first moved here, and it must have been going at a clip.
Oh, yeah, to break
And
a woodpecker beak.
yeah, and it hit the window, and I thought for sure, like, it was in another room, and I thought, "Oh my god, what happened?" And I thought a tree hit the house or something. And, and then I went running out and looked. Well, I looked at the window, and then I went running outside and picked up the bird. It was dead, of course, but its beak was broken.
Hmm, that's sad.
Yeah, and my window was still intact. Thank God.
Well, that's good. Yeah, that would be quite a problem.
Yeah, it
When you
would've.
live in the middle of nowhere, getting a new window, that's it's a whole different adventure.
Yeah. There was another bird incident when we first moved here. I had never seen a bluebird before. Do you guys have bluebirds?
In the mountains.
Okay. Well, we
Yeah.
have them here, and, there was we got up in the morning. My husband was in Switzerland, he was gone. He was working in Switzerland then. I got up in the morning, and there was a bluebird on my windowsill. You know the song?
Mm,
"There's a
mm,
bluebird on my
yeah.
window," and I'm just like, "Look, there's a bluebird on my window." I was so excited. And the kids, we all ran to the window, and we're like, "Oh, look, there's bluebirds," and all of a sudden, this falcon came out of the sky and just grabbed one of them and ripped its head off. And
Oh,
we
man.
were like, "No."
Oh my goodness. Wow. Still pretty cool to see, I guess. But a little sad. Well, that reminded me of that story that Jonathan Peugeot
Mm.
told when they had the 2 kids who visited the Pope, and
Oh,
they had
yeah.
the 2
The
white
raven and
doves.
the dove?
Yeah, and the one kid was wearing red, the other kid was wearing blue, and one was from Russia, and the other one was from Ukraine, and they were meeting with the Pope. This was, like, in 2014, I think, or 2015. It was
Yeah,
when
yeah.
there was the big revolution in Ukraine. And anyway, they were praying for peace, and the Pope was there praying for peace with them. And they released the doves, and same thing, like a hawk came and killed one of the doves, and a raven came and killed the other one of the doves.
Right.
And Jonathan was like, symbolism happens.
Ah, it
So,
does. Yeah, I don't feed my birds, the wild birds in the summertime because the
mm,
falcons will literally just hang out here and pick them off little by little.
oh, yeah,
Wherever they're congregating.
yeah. I was I was feeding the birds for a while, and then it became a mouse problem in my house, and
Oh,
that was a big problem. And so I moved the bird feeder out to a plum tree that was close to the street, but then my plum tree was violating code, so I had to cut my plum tree down. So now I need to find a new
no.
place to feed the birds. Yeah, we
Oh.
generally just get finches here. Like that's like especially in the winter, like 90% of the birds that come to the feeder are just finches.
Ours are
That's most of what
chickadees.
we have.
Chickadees in the
Mm.
winter. Chickadee dee
We
dee.
get a few chickadees, but mostly finches,
Mm,
which are
yeah,
fine. They're pretty. We get the little yellow finches. They're just beautiful little birds.
yeah, yeah,
And then we just got like common house finches.
yeah.
We used to have a lot more robins. I think a lot of birds have died from when I was a kid. Although I did visit my hometown this summer, and like there's just this huge, like there was so many birds. Like when at the hotel we were staying in, I came out and there's just birds in the trees everywhere, and I was like, okay, this is what I remember. Yes. So I guess there they still haven't gotten taken out, but around here it seems like there's too many house cats because there's just
Oh, yeah. House cats will
not a lot of
decimate.
birds. Yeah,
Yeah.
the birds they're really
I have a
uh
cat, and she's just, like, such a princess. If she gets
mm,
if she I mean, she will kill mice and stuff, but she only goes outside if it's 30 degrees. Otherwise, too cold.
yeah, that's funny.
That's how she feels about it. Yeah. Yeah. When I was in Switzerland, they still have a lot of birds of prey there. It's so nice to see, actually.
Yeah.
Lots of big hawks and stuff hovering over the fields because it's all agricultural, right?
Yeah.
So they're constantly mousing and stuff.
We have, bald eagles are making a big comeback. I see them when we go fishing pretty much every time. It's great.
Mm,
It's really
nice.
fun. Yeah,
Yeah,
I didn't see them at all when I was a kid. It was like such a rare occurrence, and now it's pretty commonplace to see bald eagle, and then a
and
lot of like hawks and falcons and stuff.
but
But
help me out here with my American geography. There's no
sure.
ocean near Utah, right?
No, no.
No, it's inland. Okay. We have
Yeah,
bald eagles here too, but
yeah.
they're especially plentiful on the coast in the wintertime.
Here
They
they
go
fish in the rivers and the lakes. You see them
yeah.
catch fish sometimes,
We
but
have we have bald eagles and we have golden eagles,
mm,
and, I mean, you see them a lot, but you especially see them in calving season because they don't bother the calves, but they go after the afterbirth. So
right.
they hang out in the big trees around the pastures where the cows are calving.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Although then they have to fight the mother because the mother cow is usually going for that too. Here's a fun fact for the city people. Animals generally eat their
Well,
afterbirth
I have to
because
tell you a story
they're
about
dehydrated, and that's how they get rehydrated, and all
yeah.
the nutrients and everything from the afterbirth, they sit there and eat it. And that's a sound, once you've heard a cow eating afterbirth, that's a sound you'll never forget. It's kind of like a rabbit dying. That's another sound you'll just never forget
Oh
once you've
god.
heard it. Yeah, rabbits dying and then a cow eating afterbirth. It's like, oh.
So, my goat kitted out. I was in the barn, I was there for it. I was making sure everything went well, and then
Mhm,
she started eating the afterbirth, right? And she's just,
mhm,
like, gnawing it with her back teeth, and it's going
mhm.
in and going in and going in, but there was a big air bubble, and then and then she coughed, and she blew this huge
Uh,
so I got my pocket knife out and I just slit it,
Cut it.
so
Yeah,
that
slit it.
the
Yeah,
air
yeah.
could get out so she could finish eating it.
That's funny.
'Cause it was just getting, harder for her to chew.
Yeah, yeah.
But when
That's
she coughed and it was like a big bubble gum.
that's really funny.
That was funny. Yeah.
Uh, the things you see, man. Yeah. Well,
Um,
this was something else too. There was one time we went up to get the cows. We were taking more cows up on the mountain, and there was one that was bloated. And my grandpa had this um, 2x4 that he had cut. He had like trimmed it down, and then there was a hole in the middle, and then it had like a piece of like a bungee cord on it. And he was like, "Go get that board out of the back of the truck." And I was like, "I don't know what you're talking about." He's like, "It's a 2x4. It's got a hole. You'll see it." Okay. So I went
yeah,
and got it, put it around the cow's mouth, into their mouth, and there's a hole in there so that you could throw salt into
right.
their mouth, and that's how you would treat their bloating. You
Yeah,
just give them a bunch of salt, and it would make the
yeah.
bloating go away. I was like, "That's something you'd never figure out on your own." One of those things you just have
Well,
to be taught.
William says kestrels are very aggressive. Those are the little falcons that killed the bluebirds in front of my children that day. We have a lot of kestrels here.
Oh, wow. We do not have
Yeah.
kestrels here. Well, and Brandy was mentioning she lives on the Jersey Shore and that they have lots of bird watchers from all over the world. And I'll have
Oh,
to say, because of the Great Salt Lake, we also have a lot of like waterfowl and that come through here migrating. So in the spring and in the fall, we get the huge flocks flying
mhm,
around. And then one time I was involved in a video project where it was when we had the 2002 Olympics. I'm dating myself. This is, but I was working in video production at the time, and there was a company that their production guys got stopped at the border. They were from Quebec, from Montreal, and their production guys got stopped at the border, so they hired us, and they had all these video shoots set up to basically showcase the unique wildlife of Utah. And it was
Nice.
a really fun project, and they were really fun to work with. But one of the days, we went out with the forest, or with the Division of Wildlife, and they had a big flat bottom swamp boat, and we got to hop in that, and we would go out into the middle of the lake, and you kind of just drive out there, and then you just turn the engine off, and you just sit there, and all the birds just come. I mean, there's just like tens of thousands of different birds, and it was all right at sunrise, so it's just beautiful lighting,
Mm.
and you're just out there and you're just waiting, and then all of a sudden you just fire up the engine and all the birds just,
Wow.
we were just there to video the birds and stuff, and it was, and then we were driving, and there was a pelican just flying right along the surface, and he was flying, we went over to him, and we were flying parallel, or we're driving while he was flying parallel on the water,
Right.
just filming him over it was so fun. That was a really cool project.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, we get a lot of unique birds here
I bet.
that are just kind of flying through. And then the brine shrimp, they feed on the brine shrimp that live in the Great Salt Lake,
Right.
and the
Yeah.
flies.
This
So,
area that I live in here too is a good flyway, like a zone for migrating birds that migrate to Alaska and
yeah.
the Yukon and stuff for the winter. So we always get flocks of trumpeter, swans, and snow geese, and sandhill crane breed here. So,
Mm,
it sounds like dinosaurs in the woods. Like, that's
yeah.
what they sound like.
We have
Dinosaurs.
cranes here. We have a lot of herons here.
We have
We
herons.
Yeah,
We
we
have
get a lot of herons.
we have tons, actually tons of ducks, lots and lots of ducks, and Canada geese, of course, and turkey vultures,
Oh wow.
and
We don't have many of those. We do have vultures, but I don't think they're
eagles,
turkey
and
vultures.
all the hawks you can imagine, tons of
Mm.
owls.
We have owls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had some fun encounters with pygmy and saw-whet owls. They almost look exactly alike, but they're just like
Hmm.
little tiny things.
Yeah.
And, usually when the winter gets longer, like, so towards the end of winter and it's cold, they'll start hanging out at my chicken coop and trying to catch mice at night. So they just kind of,
Oh
and
yeah.
I've got these buckets hanging on nails outside. They're not in the coop, they're outside of it.
Mhm.
And they'll sit on the bucket, and I don't
Mhm.
often see them, like, I just go up there, it's dark, I've got my headlamp on, and then I turn and there's this little little pygmy owl, and they have such a mean looking face. They look at you like, "What? What do you want?"
Yeah, yeah.
And they don't really go anywhere. They just sit there, you
Mm,
know?
waiting for the
And,
mice.
and I've had baby great horned owls, 3 of them one time up at the
Wow.
barn there when I went to do chores, and they were screeching for food. So their parents were still feeding them, and one was sitting right on the rafter of our barn, and one was in a tree, and one was in another tree, and they sounded like cats fighting, you know?
Yeah.
And I could
Yeah,
walk right up to them because they were babies, and they were kind of,
yeah,
I don't know.
kinda dumb.
Yeah. A lot of birds will just cry until their parents feed them,
Yeah.
come and feed them, and also, we have a pair of nesting hawks at our lake, and
Wow.
every year, mid to late summer is when they leave the young hawk alone. See, they usually only
Mm.
have 1.
Mhm.
Like, I've only ever seen 1,
Mhm.
and I always feel sorry for him because he cries. He
Mm.
sits in the trees and cries for his parents, but they don't come,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
Yeah, it's time to leave.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, so there's lots, and in Williams Lake, and Williams Lake is not a very big lake. It's actually the nickname for the town is Willie's Puddle because it's just a little tiny lake,
Yeah.
but every year they have pelicans in that lake.
Wow. Yeah,
Inland
we have
pelicans.
pelicans here. Yeah,
So
we have
weird.
quite a few pelicans around, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, there's a little city pond, that has a breeding pair that are there. We have an aviary, we have a couple of
Oh,
aviaries here too that kinda help, injured birds, but
oh,
also, just raise birds. Ah,
yeah.
Eugene.
Hello, guys.
Hello.
I
Hi.
thought I
Good
know
evening.
you're probably finishing, but I thought I'd just say
Oh,
hello.
no. No, we're not. We finished
Oh,
the story, and now we're just
Yeah.
talking about birds. And we were hoping someone would join, so
yeah.
welcome.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yes, I've listened to all the 3 stories, so thank you so much, Jeremy.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. No, it's my pleasure. It's a real joy.
Yeah. So how are you,
And now,
Eugene?
now you're talking animals and birds, and I lost track of how you came to the birds and
I don't know.
and goats.
We kind of end up rural. I think that's something I really enjoy kind of bonding with Shari about, because I had the pleasure and privilege of growing up in a rural environment, rural town, small town, and a lot of the stories you try to share them with people and they just look at you like you're crazy. So it's nice to hear crazier stories, or also crazy stories from Shari, and not just have people, like, just have the room get silent and everyone just kind of changes the subject. Shari's like, oh no, I got a story.
Like a goat that coughs and blows up her afterbirth. Like bubble gum.
Oh my God.
That's crazy.
I heard
Steve.
I heard the
Hi,
owl,
Steve.
what they
Steve and
sing.
Eugene.
You heard the what?
That the owls are not what they seem.
What does that mean?
It's a TV show thing.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Like the old days. Twin Peaks.
The Chilcotin people here are very superstitious about owls. If they hear owls near, like, it's not, if they're in the bush and they hear an owl, it's a whole totally different situation. But if owls are close to camp or close to their home, then it means someone's going to die. Or if an owl appears like in the middle of the day sitting on a fence post and you see it, like, for them, animals present themselves. So, you didn't happen to see an owl. The owl presented itself to you.
Right.
And so, yeah, they're bad omen for death in, someone close to you is going to die.
It's interesting.
And,
I watched the Orthodox documentary on Alaska. Like, it was in town a while ago. I don't know if you heard about it. Anyway, it's about Alaska. And one of the things they mention is that the locals, their attitude about hunting is they were like, we're dumb and we can't catch anything. The animals are like, all right, yeah. I'll let them catch me so they can eat. And like the animals agreed on who's going to get caught, and like, yeah, okay, you straggle behind, or you wander off alone, they'll eat you. And so when they were told, like, Jesus Christ sacrificed himself for us, they're like, yeah, we get it. Yeah. Everything in the world's been sacrificing for us this whole time because we're bumbling idiots. And so maybe their attitude about the owl too. It's not like, hey, I saw that owl. It's more like this revelation, The owl showed himself. I don't know, just interesting attitude. Very different than my attitude.
Yeah. Anyway. Yep.
So a while back, just one other comment, I guess, to make. A while back, Jeremy was talking about people in fables that are like, go to the market and get something, and he buys these magic beans because he's like dumb or whatever, like the autistic guy.
Right. Yeah.
Like the girl is like, hey, he's naked, and the emperor wears no clothes.
Right.
What did you think?
Everybody knows you're supposed to go along with it, and she's like totally clueless. But yeah, I thought that was interesting.
What did you think of the last part of that story where the demon turns into a dragon and crawls away towards the Dead Sea? Is it the Dead Sea or the Red Sea? In that story, Jeremy?
Yeah, it was the Red Sea.
The Red Sea. I'm like, that's crazy.
Yeah. There's I haven't heard a whole lot of different things, but there's things that are just like, wow, it's kind of wild. Some of like one, I think he's a saint. I don't know if he is or not, but he's gonna get murdered by this thief, and and he was sort of asking God for a sign or something like that. Anyway, some bandit comes across him in the desert, like probably 4th century or 8th century, whatever. And the bandit's like, yeah, well, I'm in this gang, and I have to kill 100 people as part of my initiation, and you're number 100, so you're gonna die. And anyway, they go. Somehow he's like, hey, will you let me at least drink some water before I die or something like that? So the bandit goes down to get water for him, and this monk is like waiting, and he's like, where is the bandit? As he goes down to the water to find him, because he thought, hey, if the bandit doesn't kill me, it'll be trouble for him, so I don't want him to get in trouble. And he goes down, and the bandit was dead. He had drowned in the water. And then
so he was the 100th.
Yeah. So and apparently that's a true story, but the reason it was told was because it's like it's a story to tell when people are like, what about the thief on the cross? He didn't get baptized or this or that. And people who don't get baptized by triple immersion or whatever.
Mm.
And it's like, well, so that thief confessed his sins. I killed 99 people, and I want to kill you. And then he went and drowned in the water, so he was baptized.
Okay.
And now he's dead, so he's in the kingdom of heaven. So it's just like, could you say the Holy Spirit was not involved in that situation at all? How do you? Is basically. But the point of like this guy's like, God, give me a sign. I don't know if whatever. I forgot what his question was. And then this bandit he's like, no, I'm going to kill you. And then the bandit ends up drowning.
Right. I'm just really curious, because I do know that a lot of the lives of the saints they're historical accounts of people, of real people.
Yeah.
But they're also mythologized, and
like Pecos Bill.
It's a hagiography, right? Yeah. I mean, heavenly patterns are being revealed in the life.
Right. Yeah.
So when the story is told, then those heavenly patterns are emphasized, and kind of brought together. Because
that's what
we saw that even
in.
Sorry, Eugene, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say the same thing that you said. Just emphasize like the further back we go and read, the lives of those saints. I mean, the more mythical they are. I mean, it seems like people saw a different reality back then. So, things turning into each other, and then the dragon started speaking, all kinds of things, and and they just talk about it in a matter of fact way. So
and everyone knew what they were talking about at the time, it seems.
And I was actually wondering what you thought about all that, Eugene, because
I actually like it. I like it. Because I mean, sometimes maybe they over mythologize some things, which is could also be a problem. But in our day and age, we under mythologize everything, and I can feel the problem with that.
Right.
The question. Nothing is mythical.
And the question is always, is that true? Is that true? And
forensically true.
Forensically true. But what about spiritually or principally or true?
That's one thing that the whole Jordan Peterson thing, and I suppose Peugeot as well. But definitely that I didn't watch much Exodus, but the whole Genesis where he's in that stage. What I got from that was my takeaway was to not get caught up in the factual repeatability and falsifiability of these different things, and just what am I supposed to learn, and what does it mean for me to do? And
well, I think the icons are actually a good example as well, right? So an icon is based on a person, and it's how they looked, but there's more to them that is revealed than what you would see with your eyes. Like you could usually see more of their head. It's usually a lot of times it's in reverse perspective. Certain things are emphasized. So their eyes are bigger, their nose is narrow, their mouth is narrow, their ears are large, and it's emphasized to teach us that we should be looking and listening, but not speaking as much. They have bigger hands. We should be engaged in the work. So they emphasize certain aspects of their person, and it's not unrealistic. It's like supra realistic. It's like revealing a deeper truth, so when you ask, is it real? It's like, yeah, it's more real than what you would see with your eyes. And it's leading you, it's calling you into seeing that world that way. I think, Luke talks about this all the time, right? His iconic vision. This is what he's talking about, where, is the dragon walking away and going to the Red Sea, that's 70 cubits long. Is that real? It's like, yeah, that's who he was arguing with, right? Like it was very real to the guy who was possessed by it, right? Now, would we see it? I don't know. If you had a video camera set up with video cameras, I don't know. But it was very real to the man who was possessed, right? And like I said, the icons are a good example of like it's a similar approach to icons that we have to hagiography, where we're emphasizing certain patterns that are revealing deeper heavenly patterns. And they are based on a person, but they're also de-emphasizing parts of them that don't matter as much and really overemphasizing parts of them that do matter.
And it's like the best way to explain it,
Well, it's the old cliche, a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Like I saw a theophany icon in Kalispell where Jesus, he's standing in the Jordan River getting baptized with everything you would see, and underneath his feet were the gates of hell, and these snakes kind of also, their heads were poking up because they were also being crushed. So he's like standing on the gates of hell, like in the resurrection icons, like the two doors across. He's like standing on that and crushing these snakes. He's in the water being baptized, and the Holy Spirit's there, and like it's
all happening.
Yeah, and it was like, well, that's not what it says in Matthew 3 or whatever. But it's like it's trying to explain, what happened,
what the passion was.
Like stop what he was doing was like, oh my God, what happened there? And so were there doors under his feet when he was in the Jordan River? So, well, then that's a fake icon. Or was it a 70 cubit long dragon? Well, it was like 69 or whatever. I don't know. It's like you could, it's like, Jesus restores sight to this guy who was blind from birth.
Yeah.
Everybody's kind of worrying about, hey, wasn't that like dirt? Didn't you put spit and dirt? It's unclean, and it's like the Sabbath, and what's going on? Like, dude, I didn't used to be able to see. Now I can see.
Yeah.
Who can do that? And like, but it was Sunday, and and so, and I'm like those guys that like complain about, this is fantastical. How could I ever possibly believe that like a guy was floating, who wasn't like Cirque du Soleil kind of thing. It was like a guy was floating, and the other monks wished that he wasn't floating because it was, causing us, controversy in town. And
there was
what I want to do is to not believe that, because then people wouldn't make fun of me.
I was watching these Russian cartoons on YouTube of, I can't remember the saint's name now.
But the battle against the Turks, or the whoever?
No. It was just a cartoon on YouTube for kids.
Oh, okay.
And they were originally in Russian, but they had them translated into English, and they were about this saint, and I don't remember who it was, but as a young boy, he's just floating around, like he floats over to his friend's house and lands in the yard.
Wow, that sounds pretty rad.
Well, yes, that's pretty common,
Yeah, it is. It's and with children especially. Like as
Yes,
children,
yes.
they're floating around, they're always floating around.
True. See,
It's like it's like when you read some of the Old Testament stories. I mean, it's when I first read about the talking donkey and
Yeah.
Balaam and talking about
forgot about
it was so fitting for the donkey to speak,
Right.
because if forensically she didn't speak, that would ruin the whole story. But whether she actually spoke or not, but I mean, the story itself is so beautiful that you must have her speak.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I was also thinking what Jeremy said about the people in icons portrayed in a
Yeah.
way that emphasizes who they are in the spiritual realm, and that's a very interesting like thing for me, that each person carries a certain certain spiritual energy, and you can kind of read it off of the person if you know them well enough. And I've experienced it in my own life, that sometimes I really feel I need to speak to that particular person about something, because I don't know why, I don't know what, but I've read something off of their faces or eyes or whatever, and that tells me, just like in the story of that Jeremy read, that is Saint
St.
Paul.
Paul.
St. Paul is simple, that this Anthony said, "This is not my business to drive out that demon. It's it's your business. I just know it in the spirit. I mean, I can't do this. This is not my thing."
Yeah.
And that this is amazing how incredible that we're both in this world, in this physical realm, but also we are in that other realm, and
Right.
even as physical beings, we're able to divine that sort of, by some spiritual sense of discernment, what kind of
Yeah.
energy the person holds. And it's very unique.
Yeah. I guess Pentecostals would call it their gift. Something like,
Well, and I think we've been,
Hmm.
well, I'll get esoteric for a second. I think our culture is under a spell that makes these things invisible to us, right? We're blocked from seeing them. I think it's our noose has been so damaged by the media that we consume, the music and the movies, and then also the teachings from the priesthood of science, that we've been blinded, and somehow been, I'll use the word gaslit, even though it almost doesn't mean anything anymore, but it's like this idea of like, when I go outside, I watch the sun rise and I watch the sun set, and when the sun rises and when the sun sets directly affects my life. It determines when I wake up and when I go to sleep. And somehow I've been convinced, like science has tried to convince me, that that's actually not what's happening. It's just an illusion. And what's actually happening is that the earth is spinning on its axis, going around the sun. And it gives me the illusion of seeing the sun come up, but I shouldn't trust my senses. I should actually trust what science says, what is actually happening.
Yeah.
And I think if you expand that out, that same spell has been placed on us to remove us from our bodies so that we can't actually see what we can see.
Yeah, you don't even love anymore. Now it's just chemicals,
Yeah, I was telling someone about an experience I had with God, and he said something to me, and they said, "Did you hear a voice?" And I'm like, "Yeah, in my head." And they're like, "Oh." End of story. And I'm like, okay, whatever.
There was this show that I watched. It was in the
in
90s. I loved it when I was in high school. It's called Northern Exposure. I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen it. It was about a doctor who he went to med school, and at that time there was this little the show took place in Alaska, and it was like an Alaskan town that paid for him to go to college. If you like for him to become a doctor, if he would go there in exchange and be like the town doctor for 5 years. So he's from Brooklyn and he goes to this tiny little town in Alaska. And so that's the kind of the basics of the story. And so you have this idea of like the urban meeting the country, but you also have the secular Jewish doctor running into native culture. that's very spiritual. And one aspect of this, I remember this one episode where there's a town shaman. He's kind of a shaman in training. He's a young native guy who's being trained, and Ed. And Ed is having a conversation with his grandfather in the bar, but his grandfather is dead, but they're sitting there talking. And the grandfather's like, "Oh, Ed, I gotta go." And he's like, "Why do you gotta go? We just started talking." And he goes, "What's that?"
Can you see the grandfather in the show?
Yeah, you can see the grandfather. They're having a conversation,
awesome.
but it's kind of like known in the story that his grandfather's dead, and he's actually one of the people training him to be a shaman. But he goes, "Ed, I gotta go." And he goes, "Why?" He goes, "Well, because Doctor, I can't remember what his name was, anyway, Joel, he's coming, and if he sees you talking to me, he'll think you're crazy." And he goes, "Why?" And he goes, "Well, he won't be able to see me." And he goes, "What are you talking about? You're right here." And he goes, "Yeah, but I'm dead." He goes, "Well, that doesn't matter." And he goes, "It does to him."
I didn't know the show had that kind of stuff in it. I heard it was
so then he's just got to leave, And so then he just leaves, and then the doctor walks in and he goes, "Oh, hi, Dr. Fleischman," and he's like, "Hello, Ed,"
it's like Snuffleupagus, but better.
Yeah, exactly. It's like no problem. Like they had these kind of running themes in the show all the time. It was really great.
Interesting.
But I think that's what's happened to us. I think our nous has been so damaged by the horrible things that we've all witnessed just by watching a movie or watching a TV show that we're not sensitive enough to notice. And we've been trained to question everything and to be disembodied and disassociated to some degree, to the point where we can't trust our own experience and the own phenomenology of our own lives.
Yeah. Well, like what was just in a conversation on the Discord voice chat the other night or last night, talking about how, when you read a really good book, like let's say Lord of the Rings, like time just doesn't exist. You bury your nose in the book, you look up and it's like 2 hours later or something. And you really don't have any concept of time. And then you literally have to remember that you're not there in the world that Tolkien has created, right? And it's very rich in your imagination. And that's how you read Lord of the Rings. And then you go to the movie and you come out and it was whatever it was, I don't know, 2 hours, 2.5 hours or something. And it's the whole book is in that short period of time, and it's almost like you've been ravaged, And the first thing that most people say is that wasn't as good as the book. Because it doesn't have that.
I'm a better writer.
Well, first of all, all your images don't match the images in the movie,
right?
And it didn't happen that fast for you reading the book, right?
And Sean,
you were dwelling with it, like literally dwelling with it, and then and at the same time, like your eyeballs are being accosted by, flashing lights, like every whatever it is, however many seconds between frames, and now you've got little kids. Like I saw my brother's stepdaughter, she's 2, and she's just walking around with a iPad that has a Disney movie playing on it, like constantly, and it's like, the only conclusion I can come to about what that's doing to us is it's literally sucking our imaginations out of sucking it dry. Like we can't even imagine something. We can't imagine
Never-Ending Story. There's a movie called The Never-Ending Story.
Oh yeah,
I've heard about it. Yeah,
like was what was coming, and he was reading this book, and he's supposed to get lost in the book, and his self-consciousness, I think, of like he's too embarrassed to like really lose himself in the story, too much ego. I I saw it when I was a kid, and I haven't seen it since then. But that's my take on it today. And it's kind of like what you're saying. It's like instead of him being the story, like he was the hero. It was like his better self was the story, his aspirations, and what was the threat was all of that would be taken from him. And so all he would do would just kind of be, there would be no more fantasy, no more imagination. He'd just be like a receptacle or something
Just
like
hop in, Mi'kmo. Hop in. We're just talking about
yeah,
stuff.
it's so today I'm still doing catechumen classes, and one of the families in there has a kid, he's like 5, and anyway, you just sort of described him as a rambunctious kid from the 70s. And because I was like, he's kind of familiar, he seems like he looks familiar in some way. And I couldn't place like some TV show or movie or something I saw when I was younger. And she's like, he's like just like a typical rambunctious kid from the 70s. And it's like, yeah, because I've never seen him holding anything other than a drawing somebody gave him, or a like one of the stuffed animals that one of the other kids has, so he can give it to him, or his friend's hand. But he's never held anything with a battery in it that I've seen. I've never seen him do that. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty interesting,
Yeah.
Well, speaking of imagination, that's interesting. I mean, I'm actually rereading the Fellowship of the Ring now, and there's this point in the story where Bilbo, in the House of Elrond, Bilbo is making a poem about Arendelle, the mythical figure, and he is writing it, and he's asking Aragorn to help him, with a couple of passages, a couple of stanzas. And it's kind of so anticlimactic. It's like Aragorn is this warrior. You don't know. You just don't think about kings of that, that magnitude writing poems about whatever. But he takes it so seriously. Yeah, he takes it so seriously. But then there's a point where Bilbo, I forgot who he's speaking with, but he basically says, I was standing there and trying to find words, and I couldn't. And I thought to myself, wow. I mean, that whole process of having had an experience, and now you're waiting for the right words to form in your mind to describe it.
Yeah.
That's such an incredible delight that humans can have. And they, what we're being deprived of is exactly this.
Yeah.
Because nowadays you can open a AI-based rhymer and get any rhyme that you want, sort of as quickly as possible. But then what happens with your brain that is deprived of that incredible ability of picking words? Or maybe the words are picking you. Like, I don't know, but it's just so beautiful the way Bilbo put it.
Yeah.
Well, George MacDonald talks about that in his imagination essay, as suddenly there stands your thought before you.
Okay.
And then he says, and who put it there?
That might be where Peterson gets it.
God thought it before you did. But for George MacDonald, our language is derived from creation. And creation is something that God made, and he put the meaning that we need for our language in the representations or the figurations or the appearances. And which is a Barfield, like when I read that MacDonald essay, I'm like, okay, is this Barfield running with these thoughts? Because that's a short bit in the imagination essay, and he actually uses the words figuration and appearances.
Wow.
And those are Barfield's favorite words, right? So anyway, he said, the way George MacDonald says it is God imbued his meaning, and he says God always says what he means. We never say what we mean. We always say more than what we mean. And you think about that, and it's true. everybody has a, a lot of what we're trying to say to each other, or when we speak to each other, what we're trying to do is get our meaning across, right? Because the words are so imbued with meaning that they can mean many things, right? And so, yeah, and that's why George MacDonald would say, it doesn't matter if you get my meaning for the fairy tale. It only matters, what he says is your meaning might be superior to mine. Because he's basically saying that language is multivalent because God imbued his meaning, which is multivalent, into creation, which is where we get our language. So
I think that this is a oft ignored value of being raised in a sola scriptura context.
Totally.
Yes. Because there's a sense in which, like, I get this experience often. Well, I'll be trying to have some deep theological thought, and I'll be really trying to find the right words to put, like you were describing, trying to find those words that can, like generate a similar feeling or a fractally similar feeling to the reality that I experienced. And the moments when I'm trying to do that and a verse of scripture comes to mind or a spiritual song comes to mind, and it's like, the exact thing I'm thinking about, and it's often embarrassing too, because it's like, I was using all of this cognitive, supposed brain power or whatever, when really it's a weakness, it's a vice. But I'm trying to use, my thinky talky brain to come up with some truth, probably to bolster my self-assessment. And the truth is, like, Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible told me so. But it's it's infinite in its utility, I guess you could say. But it's like you said, Shari, or quoting Barfield or MacDonald, that God always says what he means. And that is at the same time very comforting and also terrifying, right?
Because you got to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, and what if what he says is sacrifice your son?
To sacrifice yourself.
Not what he. Yeah.
And here's the other.
And what are you going to do with your cross once you've got it? Once you've picked it up?
Here's the other part of that equation, McMo. It's that meaning is going to change over time for you too. I was talking to Jonathan the other day. We didn't record it, but I was saying to him, the further you get up that holy mountain, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with age, but it can have to do with age, the more of the landscape you see and the more sense things make. And depending on where you're at, you pick up a book and you read, something you read when you were 12 and you're reading it when you're 30 and you're like, wait a minute, this is profound. Like I remember watching Groundhog Day recently.
It's a good one. Yeah.
I watched Groundhog Day with my kids when it came out, and I watched it again and I'm like, oh my God, this is an amazing movie.
Yeah. I've experienced that a lot.
I love it.
But speaking of kids, can you read that title?
Who is God? Who am I? Who are you?
Can you see the author's name? Yeah, down there. Anyway,
by D.
Can't see.
To your right a little bit. Oh, yeah.
Pennock.
Okay.
Anyways, it's from the 70s. They haven't changed the cover. Anyway, the priest where I go to church keeps saying, "Who was God? Who am I? And who are you?" Read the book. Read John 1. 1 John 1. Read that book. Or read that, But this is one of them, and I get it, and it's like kind of, from the 70s for kids.
Yeah.
Teens. And I'm reading it, and it's about your parents, and I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. Anyway, I'm totally humbled because I didn't know anything that was, and all of this, I didn't know it.
Yeah.
And and I really would have liked to. I mean, maybe not because I've been self-indulgent for 50 years, but
now you're ready to read it, Steve.
yeah. But the thing is, if I had read this, I mean, maybe at the right time, you know, like when I had ears to hear or whatever, I would have done things very, very differently. And yeah, anyway, it's so. But you were talking about like, you know, something you're exposed to as a kid, and then see it as an adult. It's not just that you've read it once and you've seen the light. It's like things that are made for kids are made for human beings, and I'm a human being, and unless it's just like goofing around, you know, like maybe Teletubbies probably doesn't have a whole lot to teach me.
I mean, because
not with that attitude.
Well, I think it's like some kind of weird German satanic stuff. Anyway, I don't need that.
Because of that whole phenomena, I'm really eager to go back and read some older books that I haven't really laid hands on for a long time.
Yeah.
Just to see, you know, how they sound to me now. Because honestly, when I watched Groundhog Day, I was so busy making popcorn and cleaning up the mess afterwards that I didn't even have time to really pay attention to the movie. You know,
you went full Martha. Yeah. You went full Martha.
Full Martha. Totally McMo. That's what it was.
I've definitely watched movies that I saw years back that were kind of, you know, they had an impact on me back when I saw them. And that's why when they come up on YouTube, I'm like, I don't want to watch it. And I watched it again and I'm like, yeah, it's like I understand the impact and I even can kind of remember the time, like what was going through my mind and what I was facing and learning at the time. And yeah, it's at least nostalgic, but I think it's, you know, it's been educational.
Yeah, you know, when we lived in Telegraph Creek, the winters were long and very dark, and the kids were reading. Well, actually, not all of them. My oldest daughter hated reading, and my youngest was little, so she slept. But my son was reading, and you know, everybody's kids were reading. So we had tons of books available, and I was constantly getting new books for him. And finally, he'd read everything. Everything that all the neighbors had, everything I had, everything that was in the share shed, you know, everything.
What?
And they had like
share shed. Or you share the sheep. Oh, the share shed. Sorry.
Share shed.
I thought it was like where they share the sheep. So you're sitting there reading while you're.
No, if you had stuff that was still good and you just didn't want it anymore, you put it in there and people would take and leave stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, so my husband and I were like, well, you could try reading this, and we gave him Lord of the Rings, and he was 11.
Nice.
And I thought, he's not going to, you know, we're both looking at each other going, he's never going to be able to read this. He goes, okay. So 2 weeks later, he comes back and he goes, can I have the other one? Because we told him there were 3. And I'm like, I said to him, you didn't read that. Yeah, I did. So we quizzed him. Like with a pop quiz. And we were like, oh my God, he read it. So we gave him this, you know, and then he read them all. And he brought me the last book, and his face was all really serious and sad. And he goes, here, Mom, I'm really, really sad now. I said, why? Because it's over? No, he said, because no other book will compare.
Wow.
That's what he said.
And he was right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I started reading Lord of the Rings at about that age, and I got stuck at the Council of Elrond. And I just couldn't make it through. And then, but I had already seen the first movie, I think. And so I just watched the 3 movies. And then when I was a little bit older, I finally made it through. But then
there were no movies when he read them. There were no movies yet.
Yeah. So I can't remember. I was maybe 5th grade. So 12, probably something like that. I don't know. But yeah, I remember being a kid. I did not really like reading that much. I know now, compared to other people, that I was a reader. I was reading the Bible a lot. You know, I was reading theology books.
You know what I read? Get this. I didn't read much, but the thing that I read a lot and just in my free time was the dictionary. I was absolutely fascinated with the meanings of words.
Like run.
I was always
I just like to
obsessed
see
with
how many pages of definitions for run there were. I thought that was interesting.
I just love and the old dictionaries. Like I've actually got a couple. Whenever I find an old dictionary, I buy it and take it home.
I have a collection. I have a huge collection of dictionaries.
Do you? Were you a dictionary person too, Jeremy?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well,
wow.
yeah, no, I have. Yeah, Samuel Johnson made the first English dictionary. I have his. I have.
Wow. I'm not
I have
that.
a 1913 Webster's. I have an 1830. I mean, the 1828 Webster's. I've got a.
Okay.
But Jeremy, why aren't you?
I've got the 1963 third edition, which is. So there's a whole thing about. Okay, let's talk about.
Why aren't you constantly correcting us on how we're using the language?
Slack says.
No, because it's I try not to be the well actually guy, because the well actually guy is not welcome in a party for very long.
He's like looking at the big grammatical error in his eye.
Yeah.
Or he's
actually, this is an interesting thing to bring up, though. I want to bring this up. I think it's no one else will care, but I think it's very interesting.
Here's my sister.
The 1963, the third edition of Webster's that came out. Was a big shift in of how to make a dictionary. So up to that point, especially Noah Webster's dictionary, his whole idea was, let's see how the language is used in the canon. So Shakespeare, Chaucer, and the King James Version of the Bible, and almost all of his usage examples came from the canon. Right. Well, in 1963, the Marxists had kind of infiltrated Webster's by that point, and they were saying, the dictionary is one, not authoritative, it's descriptive, and two, we're going to report on modern usage and have modern usage and modern usage notes be the primary sources, and the historical will just be in the notes. So it was a fundamental shift in how dictionaries were viewed and how they were made and the purpose of the dictionary, and at that point is when the language really started changing dramatically.
It fell apart.
Because it became recursive.
Okay, this is fascinating to me now.
Itself.
Yeah,
and that's when the language ran away with itself.
Yeah, you said nobody would care, and I'm like, okay, now we have to talk about this for the next 3 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, but look, Cassandra's like, did we all live the same life?
And let's just say this:
what that word, this is the thing I noticed in my lifetime, is that there was a shift in people's attitude. Well, it doesn't matter that this word always meant that. Now it means something else, but we don't care.
Back in my day, gay meant happy.
Well, Tracy, this is my sister.
That sort of context, it's like in general.
Yeah,
it's like
she can testify that I read the dictionary.
Like ironic and sarcasm.
Yeah.
Well, Jeremy, what do you think?
Oh, I'm not being sarcastic. I'm being ironic. You cannot volitionally be ironic. That would be an oxymoron.
Okay, wait.
Don't tell me what I can't do. I'm E. Cummings over here. I can do what I want.
Yeah, Steve, the grammaticist, is coming in with a hot take. So
yeah, you see how about this one? This one really pissed me off because all the millennials, when they were still skinny and little, were like, "I'm being ironic." It's like, no, you're being sarcastic. And I was of the generation where teachers were saying you can't be sarcastic; it's mean. And then they're like, "Oh no, I'm not being sarcastic. I'm just being ironic." It's like, no, that's cruel, hurtful sarcasm, and ironic is out of your control. You can't willfully do that. Doesn't say that now in the dictionary. They're basically there's no.
I gotta look that up in the dictionary.
That's very interesting. That is a unique.
Used to be authoritative, and now they're descriptive, right? That was a big shift.
Well, yeah, that's very valuable for me because I both like being sarcastic and ironic. So I'm probably going to need to figure out what I'm doing wrong there. But Jeremy,
I think irony is funny, And that's why sarcasm is a good type of humor.
Yeah.
The irony is also totally tragedy. But hell,
well, Jeremy, what
laugh at it.
Can you maybe narrow in or steelman the reasons behind the changes to it being a more description of modern usage versus an authoritative, this is how to use the word? Like, why is that a Marxist thing?
Well,
or what's the steelman of that? Like, what were they thinking? Kind of is my question.
They were thinking that that we need to move into the future without being fettered to what has happened in the past. If that sounds familiar,
about being unburdened.
You almost said it right.
I wish I was.
Said it right.
I didn't say it right. I kind of want intentionally because I don't want AI to like shut me down. But no, I'm actually being serious. It was a deliberate shift in order to start being able to move the language in the directions they wanted to, because
that's
and also it's a move to egalitarianism. It's a move away from hierarchy. It's a move away from being bound by the canon, right? Like, how many writers today, how many movies are they, and even writers and directors who are saying, oh, the fans are so obsessed with the canon. We're so confined by the canon. We just want to do what we want to do. And so that revolutionary spirit has been here with us since the third edition of Webster's Dictionary.
So do you see it as like a fringe kind of getting too close to the center? Because what struck me as you were describing that is like, that's true, but then there's also this level or this layer of the idea that, like, poets, for instance, are so familiar with the way language is used that they can skillfully play all of the registers at once so that they can say everything they're trying to say, right? And there's a kind of idea of like, you've got to know the rules to break the rules kind of a thing with poetry. I mean, you mentioned E.E. Cummings, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it strikes me that is, it could be a example of the creative types, or the too high in openness, the fringe characters who are anti-hierarchy, getting a little too close to the reins of power or something.
McMo, I think there's going to be two sides to that coin, right? You're going to have people who are trying to move the language forward creatively, and then you're going to have people who are trying to subvert culture by changing the linguistic landscape. And something to think about.
I have a perfect example.
Let me finish talking.
Yeah, sorry.
Let me finish talking.
Sorry, Shari.
You're not done?
Okay. Perfect example is when immigrant communities move to another country, like America or Canada, and they speak their language with each other. They often remain in a very traditional, old kind of version of their language. But their country, so like I'm thinking of Switzerland, for example, you get Swiss, German immigrants in Canada. They speak an old kind of Swiss German that doesn't really progress with modern times. But in Switzerland, the language is changing, right? So now they don't say this word for butter. They say the German word for butter, which is like anathema to most, immigrant Swiss people. So the culture itself will progress, and the language will move the culture in that mode of progression, right? So, actually, I don't even know what happens first, the chicken or the egg, but you can really see clearly in immigrant communities in other countries how they preserve the language, because they're trying to preserve a memory, right, of what it was like at home.
Oh, right. Yeah, it's like a nostalgia.
They've also kind of missed out on whatever was culturally happening back home. For example, like maybe there was a TV show that used a different word for butter.
Well, and what's
like the common thing that everybody would do. but it didn't happen. They didn't see it in America. You know, that, you know,
I mean, I think it's natural for language
it
to
will
move
change.
on, you know? Yeah,
Nobody says far out anymore. And that's not because of like some
I do.
puppet
I
master
still
Marx
say it.
that made it so no one will say far out anymore. But you know, if you go from an institution that's like, well, what we're trying to do is like, so a millimeter is still a millimeter, and a centigram is still a centigram, and a you know, irony is still irony. That's what the institution was for. And then it's like, well, no, it's just kind of like what makes more sense. And it's like, well, I'd rather be slimmer than I truly am, so I wear a size 28 pair of pants. You know, it's like, well, yeah, maybe I feel good, but it's like, then what's an inch? You know?
Yeah, so that's making me think of a lot of things. One is just Wittgenstein and the idea of language games. And when I read Wittgenstein, I couldn't help but thinking of my father, who is on the autism spectrum. And just growing up with him as my, you know, my number one hero. I have a great dad. Great relationship with my dad.
That's cool.
But there was a lot of things that I realized that he was missing from social interactions. And a lot of it has to do with a specific view of language and how language is used. And what he's missing is a lot of ways in which the language games are playing, and he doesn't know the rules to those games, is one way to put it. But then the other thing, and I don't know if I can connect this totally, but it strikes me that in the same way, there's a weird sense in which and I'm going to use very blunt terms here that aren't probably as precise as I wish they were, but forgive me. They're like the Marxist move of taking over the language so as to control society can't really happen, because once the language is changed, you're now in that realm where you don't know, you've already crossed the Tower of Babel line, in a sense. And so there's a weird sense in which, like, what the conservatives are worried about is like the Orwellian newspeak, when really, like, the first step towards that newspeak has apparently already happened, which is an acknowledgement of, or a changing of attention from how language should be used to how language is being used. There's a sense in which once you've made that shift, there's no going back. It doesn't matter if you try to convince somebody that this is the way language should be used. They are still kind of going to, if their primary focus of attention is the relational, they are going to be using that more liquid, that more dynamic way of speaking, where they, you know, and I'm guilty as charged at this. I am not a precise thinker. I use words poetically. I'm a mosaic thinker, you know, however you want to put that. But that kind of shift to me is very interesting, because, like, I guess I'm wondering, like, I don't think there's any going back. Like, and this happens kind of person to person all the time. When someone's like, no, this means this.
Should be an anchor.
Do what?
Law and science should be anchors, because you know, like, so like if the Oxford Dictionary or whatever, that, you know, that the definition of words was authoritative, it definitely is in law. Although people try to argue that too. But,
yeah, no, they try to remove that.
But they need to argue. They need to spend a ton of money to argue it. Right. You know, whereas like in the parlance of just everyday life, you're at risk of being uncool if you're tone deaf to the new way of thinking and looking and talking about things. Yeah. Whereas law, it's like that's a tort if you do it wrong, and then now we have to argue over that.
Right. Yeah. Right. And yeah, and this is what there is a major legal debate on historic, you know, or originalists versus
that kind
modernists,
of thing.
right? So, and it's related, and I think it goes back to the nominalist versus realist argument in in philosophy,
I'm not
where you
familiar.
have nominal is that words equal the thing that they're describing, and that if you want to change the thing you're describing, you just change the word that you use to describe it, and that words have no intrinsic meaning in themselves, and that objects have no intrinsic meaning, and that all the categories that we assign to objects are just arbitrary and that can be changed at any time, which is kind of the prevalent. Like, I think our main culture war is between nominalism and realism. And realism argues that there's meaning in an object and that we are apprehending that meaning, and that you can't change that apprehended meaning just by changing the word used to refer to it.
Yeah,
but,
and cards on the table. I am often accused of being a nominalist. So
that's all right. We can still be friends. We can work out of it.
We have lost our mythologies.
And
this kind of brings it around again to the lives of the saints.
Yeah.
And why I think it's so important. And why I think telling stories and reading poetry is so important.
Yes.
Because we actually, as moderns, live in a world of dead metaphors. And that's a world that is not incarnational. It's not alive. It's not enchanted. If the metaphors are not dead, then you live in an enchanted world, right?
Yep.
And that, I actually think the only way to retrieve that mindset is to really get into the actual art of storytelling. I think what Martin Shaw is doing is great, and immersing yourself in story and poetry. That's what I think.
Yeah, that's resonating. Oh, I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you loud and clear, Shari. Yeah, that's really resonating with me. One phrase that's been coming up for me a lot lately is the fact that we have memes now, and we seem to have lost metaphor.
Right.
I like memes, but I like metaphor.
And then the other piece. Oh shoot! Did I forget what it was? Yes, it's the.
Do you notice, McMo? I just have to ask you. I have to ask you a dumb old lady question. Is it just me, or do you think that memes are, like, to me, almost all the memes are choices? It's either this or that. Do you ever notice that with memes?
That's a common meme right now. Which way? Yeah, and maybe
Steve,
it's
she asked me. Steve, your beard is gray. I'm the authority. My beard is not gray. I can speak on the memes, Steve. I'm the millennial in charge here.
How many memes have you looked at today?
Give me the down low.
Looked at today. How many memes have you copied and posted into a different group?
Too many.
Are you talking to me?
More than 12?
Are you talking to me?
Today? More than 12?
Okay, go McMo.
Today I've been evacuating. But yeah, so there are levels of memes. You described one level very accurately. And not to stereotype, but this does seem to be more of the boomer meme, where it's highly there's not a lot of irony. There's not a lot of cynicism or sarcasm in a lot of the boomer memes.
They're kind of.
But that's neither here nor there, because it's the same. It's not necessarily a generational thing. I think that it's more of just a like tech literacy thing. So there's levels of irony the deeper you get into it, where it becomes impossible to explain. But this actually brings me back to the other point I was going to say, which was it's Byung-Chul Han, the difference between information and narrative. And the fact that, and I've been thinking, I was thinking about this a lot, because of another, my home being, my home is fine, but like my hometown, Asheville, being wrecked by a storm. I'm evacuated right now. I'm at a hotel. We could have stayed. I'm of mixed emotions about it, but my wife needed, she's a delicate princess flower. She needed showers. She needed to feel better. So I got her out of the state of emergency.
Yeah.
But yeah, what I'm saying is, I was thinking about this, and I wanted to talk to you, Shari, about this because of exactly what you said. And I think that this ties into World War II and the PTSD, and there was a loss of the ability for people to tell ancestral stories that pass down wisdom.
Yep.
All of the stories
Right.
from World War II demolished the wisdom of the past, because if the wisdom was that wise, why did it lead to this? And so there was a real reluctance, I think, from the greatest generation to tell stories of the old ways and how life is meant to be. Now what we have is information. We have protocols. We have like it's very much influenced by World War II, but it's also this kind of, and forgive me again, I don't say this with any vitriol in my heart. I really do mean this, but like the kind of autistic way that I personally see a lot of people wanting to enforce language, concepts, and it's for the sake of clarity, and I get that, but it's not the transference of wisdom. You know, it's knowledge. It's not the type of thing that made Saint Thomas Aquinas basically say that all of his writings, all of his summas, were basically chicken scratch compared to the glory of God. Yeah. And so I think this is why I've been obsessed with the Lives of the Saints series, because of this basic thing.
Okay, so here's what I would start out by saying. I think we think that exchanging information is communication. Like, we're at that point now. Like, everything is data driven, right? Like, you can't argue with the data. So all you have to do is pull out a chart or some statistics, and then you can shut down the conversation. And I see it happening all the time. And it's mind-boggling to me, because it's like, oh, well, wait a minute. Like, data can be collected in various ways, and none of this is certain. Like, none of it is certain, right? We have to have a dialogue. We have to tell our stories, and we have to empathically resonate with one another in order to make sense of the world. We can't make sense of the world when we're just exchanging information, right?
But
so
the
it's
thing
like,
is,
I'm
we're not
lost. I go to a
exchanging
gas
all the
station.
information. We're blind to almost everything.
Well,
We
information
have
is not
no idea what the
communication. That's
person who's talking to us is saying. So it's like the whole idea of like, oh, well, I have the data, so I'm going to win the argument. It's like, you do not have all the data, first of all, definitely not. And you don't even understand all the data, and you have no idea who you are, and you have no idea what you're even doing and why you're doing it. And that's what's going on. And there's so much time, myself and I, it seems like that's maybe always been like that, but that's the modern world, is at least putting so much time and energy into that. And it's just like, or I should say, let me put it this way. I'm ruining my own life constantly, and I could stop that, and it will take me the rest of my life to even make a dent in like cutting that.
Shari, how did you put it?
There's so many things that everybody's doing instead of that. And then we make it seem like, oh, this is such a big deal because like I have this data set, so I'm going to like talk and now I understand the world and everyone has to listen to me. But it's like, you don't even know what you're talking about.
Right. So what were you going to ask, McMo?
How did, sorry, I got distracted. How exactly did you put it? Did you say that information was not knowledge, or information was not wisdom? What was the exact thing that you said?
Information is not communication. So I think that communication, or let's say dialogos or communion, I think all those three, in my mind at least, are on the same level. I think that is when we actually can touch consciousness, like when we feel like we're in a groove with somebody and we're just like, oh, this is, there's no imminent feeling that we have to really explain what it is that we mean. We don't find ourselves saying all the time, do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? And we have people in our lives who who we can do that with more easily than others, right? Like
you
family
just
members or
memory
best friends.
That's all.
Best friends, or something like that, right? Where we can just say and nothing is misunderstood, and we don't have to go back and say, no, that's not what I meant. I meant this, and so.
And I suppose like we're talking about relationality. That's what they're talking about.
Well, it's like I said, it's communion, it's dialogos, and I think that that's actually communicating. Like when we're in that pocket, we're able to share consciousness with each other. And it has to come from a it is what Desmet calls empathically resonating with another person, right? That's communication. That's communion. That's dialogos. But we live in a world that is saturated with information. Everybody's collecting information, and they think that if they have information, they have power.
Well, they think the economy is based on it.
Steve, dude, you keep interrupting, bro. I don't know if you can't hear, but it's like I feel like Shari's trying to talk, and like you keep talking. I don't know if you can't hear, but it's like I'm trying to listen to both of you, and it's becoming increasingly difficult.
Yeah. Anyway, that's what I'm talking about, McMo. It's I don't know if that made sense to you or not, or if I
think so. I guess I struggle with this. I'm not sure if it's my context growing up with my parents who, I felt like, as a teenager, like they don't understand me, man. And then even some, certain things with my wife where I'm like, yeah, I'm just, even my best friend and the person who knows and loves me both, I still utterly confuse sometimes, and vice versa. And so, yeah, I think I agree with what you're saying. I think that there is still the sense that like the norm is not that type of intimacy and connection. And because I guess I'm tempted to wonder if well, I guess I would just see it. Maybe I shouldn't put it so cynically or negatively. The way that I would put it is oftentimes in those moments, it feels like I don't even know what I'm saying, but like that the Lord is speaking through me or something like that, and that it's received from the other person, and but not just that specific description of it. It can also happen the opposite way, where I feel like the Lord is speaking to me through another person. And so I felt that type of intimacy, I guess, or that connection. But I've never experienced, like you're saying, the like when you understand that a horse understands you, I guess. Even though I guess I have with my dog, but it's not as that kind of way of perceiving is not as easily graspable for me, I guess.
I don't think and honestly, I mean, I don't think that's something that that many people do. But I know a lot of horse people, like a ton of horse people, like they're doing this and they know it. And, when you talk about it, yeah, there you go. I feel Shari's point relates to Rudolf Steiner's work on the Ahriman, and it attacks the mind. It's cerebral. It's data. And that's right. It's cold. It's steely. It's hard. It lives on dry land, which is like, what a dry conversation is like. It's terrible, right? And go ahead,
I was
Jeremy.
just going to say, to take this thread back a little bit, it's that. So, I can point at 1963 with the third edition, but it actually goes before that. And you can say that Samuel Johnson's first dictionary, which was the first dictionary ever made, was a product of the Enlightenment. And then you can go further back than that and say, this came from the Reformation. And then you can go further back and say, this came from the printing press. And then you can go further back than that and say, to Plato, this came from writing words down, right? When you write something down, it dies a little bit. And when it dies a little bit, this is what you're talking about, Migmo. A language can't, that's why you need a new edition of the dictionary all the time, because it is living. It lives between us. It lives among us. And actually, so I'm actually still manning your point a little bit, Migmo, in that I think that each of those attempts by the left brain to capture and to categorize and to explain and to define, it was a dissection, and it was a vivification. It was a death. It was a death of a language as soon as you wrote it down. A vivisection. Yeah, thank you. And as we killed it, there was this other spirit that rose up that said, no, let's keep it alive, and let's not try to keep it in the past. Let's not keep pointing back. Let's point it forward. And I just to steel man that move of let's make dictionaries descriptive and not prescriptive I think is an attempt to that. It is a postmodern move of let's not try to keep pointing back at the past, because we can't go back. Just like you said, Migmo, we can't go back. We can't go back to what the word fear meant in 1913. Because and this is the
here's
example.
The thing. Here's what.
Oh yeah. Go ahead. No, I'm done.
Well, I was just gonna say that the only way that these things get revivified, and just in the nature of that word, is they have to die first, right? So like we have to get to a point where this is all coming to a head, and then people are going to look for the real. They're going to want to reanimate and re-enchant their lives. And I think that's what modernity has brought most people to this point, where now they want to go to a divine liturgy. They want to read the lives of the saints. They want to read fairy tales. They want, I mean, this is not everybody. It's like, it's just us, really, guys. Like, but but at the same time, we ripple out into the world. So it starts somewhere and it just grows from there, right? So but that's the way these things happen. They have you have to actually squeeze all the toothpaste out of the tube before you throw it out, right? Before you start a new one. It's kind of like that. And I think we're right at the end of the tube, folks.
Yeah, the image that's coming to mind is the dry bones. Lord, can these dry bones live?
Yes. That's right.
if the dry bones are the kind of top-down authoritative, this is the way that the word works, then that obviously, to me, leads to a certain type of need for the incarnate word. And what does it mean for the word to take on flesh? Because I think that's a revivification, right? Like that's what we're talking about.
Yes, and
dare I say reincarnation? I just came from Mark's stream, so maybe I've got the Buddhist,
Well, it's kind of it's cool, the dry bones too, because the dry bones, it's a backwards, like it's going from, like when a child is conceived, they don't have bones, right? The bones are kind of last, and so it's literally a dead thing it's being backwards born. It's being born backwards or something like that. Like I thought about it briefly, and it fascinates me because, like, even
Shari,
Ezekiel's
how could I
be
born backwards? Would I have to go back into my mother's womb?
Yeah, didn't somebody say that once, Migmo?
No, it's a complete original thought for me. I'm being creative, like Luke told me to
do. Yeah, but that's
I interrupted.
That's what that is. No, it's okay. And then here's the thing. You know what comes right after the Valley of the Dry Bones? It's when God takes the Mashiach ben Yosef and the Mashiach ben David, two separate sticks, and he joins them together as one.
Ruh-roh.
I'm not going to say more about that, but I'll just leave it there. I find that really fascinating.
I have a couple of things I wanted to share that also tie into this. Let me share my screen real quick. Hold on. I'll share screen, and I want this one first. Okay, so first I'm going to start with the current definition. This is from Merriam-Webster, the current definition of fear.
Miriam.
And this is fun. And it says, an unpleasant, often strong emotion caused by anticipation or awareness of danger. And this other stuff we don't need to worry about. I only wanted to show that one. So anticipation or ranges of danger. So it's a physical, primarily physical threat, right? So now I'm going to share the old version, the 1913 Webster's. One second. Let me share it. And because this kind of illustrates what I was talking about. Two things are happening. So this one, a painful emotion or passion excited by the expectation of evil or the apprehension of impending danger, apprehension, anxiety, solicitude, alarm, dread. So we went from, in 1913, fear is a painful emotion excited by the expectation of evil to a fear of danger or fear of pain. It was like we went from spiritual to a physical. And that's been an interesting, I've been pondering this for years. And then the
did
other
you
thing
take that away, or did I take it away? Sorry. You took it.
I took the other one away. I'm sharing again. I'm sharing a different one.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So yeah, this is the one from 1913. I'll read it again. A painful emotion or passion excited by the expectation of evil or the apprehension of impending danger, apprehension, anxiety, solicitude, alarm, dread. So that's one interesting thing, is that we shifted so we went away from the spiritual to the more psychological or physical as a definition of fear. But then the other thing, and this is the really sad thing to me, is that we also lost a really beautiful gradient. So this down here, the degrees of this passion, beginning with the most moderate, may thus be expressed: apprehension, then fear, then dread, then fright, and then terror. Right? So we had 5 words that were a gradient of this feeling that have all been smashed into one and then politicized. Some of those words have been politicized. Some of them have lost their meaning, like fright. Dread, we don't hardly use at all, except for like in religious contexts.
The Rastaman.
And apprehension is like a, general little small sense of unease. But it's like we lost this beautiful gradient. They've all been smashed together. And I think that's another kind of a deliberate move, is that we've lost nuance and simplified. And I think this is what you were getting at when you were asking about memes, right? Where they've smashed everything together.
Yeah.
And oversimplified everything. And we've lost these beautiful gradients. So this is why I keep old dictionaries. So anyway, okay.
Which dictionary is this one?
This is the Webster's 1913. So you can if you go to websters1913.com, you can look up words, and it has, and as you can see, the usage notes are from the canon, John Locke, Milton.
Yeah. So like
Jeremy,
Jeremiah,
World War II, we didn't need to worry about evil anymore.
What's that?
Yeah.
20 years after World War II, we didn't need to worry about evil anymore. Didn't need worry. Yeah, that's kind of weird. By the way, McMo, you were talking about like communication with your dog.
Yeah.
Earlier, we were talking about the talking donkey.
Oh yeah, Balaam's ass.
So maybe
that was my nickname in high school.
You were called Balaam?
Balaam's ass.
Oh, right. But yeah, maybe that's how it happened. Because I've communicated with dogs.
Well, I remember being a kid and it striking me as very unsettling that dogs look you in the eyes. That I remember I was driving past a dog that was in the back of a truck, and it looked me right in the eyes, and it kind of unsettled me. I was like, "What in the? How does it know to do that? Why isn't it looking at the shiny, you know, mirror or the window or the trees or why did it look me in the face?"
You know what my dad used to tell me, Mick Mo, about dogs? He'd say dogs are not, they don't think. They just do. They are like machines. They're programmed, and I'm like, have you ever paid any attention to our dog, Dad?
They may be very passionate.
And so it was a constant running thing where the dog would go in the kitchen and then turn around and get a drink of water and then go lie down. And I'd say, look, Dad, she changed her mind.
Yeah. I can tell when my dog's thinking. He's smart, but he takes a few seconds sometimes.
Yeah. But just imagine, I mean, that my dad's generation, they believed everything was a machine.
Yeah.
Most of them.
Yeah.
Right?
My dad kind of tends to see things that way too. But he's animals are his kryptonite. He can't help but love little creatures with all his heart.
Love it.
But
you had a little chick out on your shoulder the other day.
Me?
No, Shari. You brought you were talking about animals being kryptonite, and she brought this little chick that was like nesting in her hair, and everybody on the video was like, "Oh my God, that's so cute." Animals are kryptonite, man. Especially little baby ones.
Little baby chickies.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I think I'm going to have to call it 2 hours and 20 minutes, and Jeremy has to go to bed.
Oh, well.
I got to go back and watch the beginning, see how off base my comments were,
Oh, no. It relates so just to tie in, we talked about St. Paul the Simple, and St. Paul the Simple basically was autistic. And it was like very direct, and like whatever Anthony told him to do, he just did. And just took it told me he was like, get out of here and don't say anything more. And so he was like, okay. And he just went in his cell and was silent and wouldn't talk to anybody until Anthony came to his cell and was like, why aren't you talking? He was like,
because you told me.
He wouldn't talk. And he was like, he commanded him, tell me, why do you want to talk? And he goes, well, because of you, Father, you told me to go away and not say anything. So it's like, it was just like beautifully autistically obedient, just like
he was
literally.
I refuse to use that word in the Lives of the Saints. It should be forbidden. Autism doesn't exist in the Lives of the Saints. They were children of God.
I
be children of God.
That Saint's life.
I
just hate labels. I'm
saying, I was relating to what McMo was saying earlier.
I'll tell you what got me about that. I'm going to read you something before we sign off. I got to do this. I got to, let me see here. It's something that Graham Pardon wrote that I read recently. So, and if Graham's watching, please excuse me. I'm going to read something out of one of your essays. Where's it now? Oh, here it is. Okay. But to go into the unknown to grow poems like this from the desert of the real is a life of exile and isolation, half self-imposed, half unavoidable, exhilarating, but not at all fun, a kind of half savage, half seraphic, self-sacrificial sickness. And then he quotes Ammons, a poet. I desire the ease of wisdom, but have been unwilling to surrender the madness of poetry. That was Ammons again, and it makes me think so much of the prophet Ezekiel, who was certainly what we'd now call a poet, and also what we'd now call homeless and unemployed. Perhaps also what we'd now call mentally ill, lying on the naked earth on his naked left side for 390 days, tied down by ropes and eating barley bread baked on top of incandescent cow dung, as if slowly giving birth to the divine words streaming down from the infinite, who, in capital letters, warns him quite bluntly from his own anguished experience that no one will listen to these words anyway. When he can finally stand up again and say them, that's hashtag poet life. And that's the kind of creative agony always on offer for free everywhere in the holy earth, the holy air, for anyone who'd like to suffer it, which is why atheists like Larkins and Ammons can speak words from God beyond religion, and why poetry, which is only alive to the extent that it strips away idols, letting gods float away with the ease of dandelions, why poetry, when it's true poetry, shining in the splendor of its efflorescent, apophatic ephemera, is even truer than true religion. And, you know, when he says here, it makes me think so much of the prophet Ezekiel. We're like, yeah, down with that. Who we'd certainly now call a poet. Yeah, he was a poet. But we'd also call him homeless and unemployed. You know, it's an abstraction. We'd also call him autistic. We'd call him mentally ill. We'd call him, right? And now all of a sudden we've dismissed him and he's just become some guy pushing a shopping cart downtown. You know, honestly, we have to stop doing that. We live in an enchanted world, you know? So that's why I called it out. And I love you guys very much.
I wear mentally ill as a badge of honor.
Yeah. Me too.
Proudly mentally
Been there,
ill.
done it. Me too. Me too. But on the other hand, we know that what that, you know, we know what that does to the dialogue. So.
Yeah, it's categories are useful and destructive at the same time, right? It's
well, if you're trying to classify plant species, you're going to need a lot of categories, right?
Right.
But if you're going to go smell the roses, you don't need any.
Oh, nice. Nice. No, well played. That's nice. That's good.
Yeah. All right. Love you guys. Thanks everybody for joining us. This was great to have so many people in.
Yeah, it was a good time.
It
was really fun.
Good night, all.
Night.
Bye, y'all.
See ya.